Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this episode of the show, we're taking a look at the third installment of the UFC on Fox series, which will take place live on May 5th, 2012 from East Rutherford, New Jersey, and the event will be headlined by a lightweight battle between Jim Miller and Nate Diaz, which I'll be breaking down on this episode, along with two other main card fights. Before getting to those predictions, quickly looking back at UFC 145, I went 8-4 overall. I started off very well with a 6-1 mark. I had a little slow down in the middle, losing 3 consecutive fights. But if you purchased my UFC 145 bet pack for $5 on the site, all of those, or 2 of those 3 fights, I would have told you about potential upsets and encouraged you to bet on the underdog based on value. So please check those out as well. Even though I didn't predict a certain fighter to win, doesn't mean I don't see value. And I talk about that in all my bet packs. $5, a ton of information, a very successful bet pack again last week. So please check that out at kamikazeoverdrive.net in the bet shop. Now, also available on the website, I had an opportunity to sit down with the one half of the co-main event for the UFC on Fox 3, Johny Hendricks. He is the next focus of my one-on-one with interview series, adding to Chris Clements and Dennis Seaver. So thank you very much, Johny Hendricks, for giving me the opportunity, and that interview is posted on the website as well. And finally, thank you very much to all my sponsors, MMABettingOdds.com, CouchFighter.co, MMACrips.com, all of these sites hosting and posting my videos. I'm forever grateful to all of you, and of course, the Adrenaline Training Center over in London, Ontario. Thank you very much to all of those guys over there. So please check them out. The links are available on my website. And now it's time to get into my first prediction of the evening. In the UFC's middleweight division, 23-3-0, Rousimar Toquinho Palhares will match up with Alan the Talent Belcher, 16-5-0. Belcher's won 3 in a row, while Rousimar has won 7 of his last 8. Now, Palhares is quickly gaining a reputation as the most lethal submission fighter in the UFC today. In 7 octagon conquests, he has amassed 5 wins by submission, 4 of which the product of a leg-based submission hold. A BJJ black belt, Palhares brings an absurd amount of physical strength and an uncanny ability to generate submission opportunities. He averages just over 4 takedowns per fight, while completing 45% of his takedown attempts. If he is unable to secure a takedown, he will pull guard or dive on a limb, as was the case in his last fight against Mike Macenzio. Another interesting stat is that he has a 0% takedown defense, which is because he is more than willing to accommodate any fighter interested in taking this fight to the ground. Now, Alan Belcher is also a BJJ black belt and has 7 submission victories while being tapped out just once. Belcher has discussed the possibility of going to the ground with Toquinho and potentially submitting him, but this approach would be far from advisable. Belcher would be best suited to keep this fight standing and use his Muay Thai. He's a talented striker with 8 wins by knockout. He will throw a lot of kicks, utilizes mainly straight punches, and will work the Thai plum. Now, Palhares' striking has improved significantly. He uses a lot of movement while maintaining a low stance to maintain the threat of a takedown. He likes to throw a big overhand right and will attempt a lot of kicks. Against Dan Miller, he caught him with a front kick and dropped him with a head kick. But Palhares' chin has been questioned as he was stunned by a quick shot in the Miller fight. If Belcher can keep this fight standing, he has a good chance to outstrike Palhares, and we have seen the muscle-bound Brazilian slow down in longer fights. Now, Belcher will need to use his 4-inch reach and 4-inch height advantages, along with a lot of movement to maintain separation. Over his career, Belcher has had issues with ground fighters getting taken down and drawn into grappling-based fights. In his last matchup with Jason McDonald, McDonald was able to close the distance almost immediately and clinched and eventually pulled guard. In his fight with Dennis Kang, Allen was taken down 3 times and really struggled with Kang's guard, and prior to that, he got taken down 5 times by Ed Herman. Palhares does an excellent job disguising his takedown attempts, throwing an overhand right or a wide variety of kicks, and then shooting or diving on a limb almost immediately. When he gets his hands on an opponent, his strength and quickness are overwhelming, and he usually doesn't afford an opportunity to escape. Palhares was able to pick up and slam Dan Henderson, which is impressive in itself, and if he can create a scramble, he is so hard to defend against. There are too many ways for Palhares to set up his submissions, so my prediction is Rousimar Palhares to defeat Alan Belcher by submission. In the co-main event of the evening, Koscheck 19-5-0 battles 12-1 Johny Big Rig Hendricks. Hendricks has won 3 in a row and is coming off a huge 12-second knockout of John Fitch, while Koscheck has picked up back-to-back wins in his last 2 fights. Now, both men are decorated collegiate wrestlers that have successfully transitioned their skills to MMA. Comparing their respective ground games, Koss holds a significant edge in submission victories with 5 compared to only 1 for Johny. Statistically, Koss lands a higher percentage of his takedowns, completing 55%, 10% higher than Hendricks. But Hendricks holds a decisive edge in total takedowns per fight with 5.07, almost double Koscheck's output. Both men have decent takedown defensive numbers, with Hendricks holding the edge 64% to 62%. Now, traditionally, when good wrestlers meet inside the cage, they have a tendency to cancel each other out, resulting in a striking-based contest. Both men have significant knockout power with a combined 4 Knockout of the Night awards, Koscheck with 5 wins by KO or TKO, and Big Rig Hendricks with 7. Now, Koscheck's power comes from his right hand. If he's able to connect, it is a game changer. Koss doesn't use a lot of leg kicks, relying mainly on his boxing. He will set his right up with a series of left jabs, but he has a tendency to forego the jab and focus too much on his power. The end result of this is Koss's inability to land anything with regularity, mainly because his opponent is able to recognize and avoid what is coming. Now, Johny Hendricks' power punch is his left hand. He has stopped several fighters with it, including Amir Sadallah, Charlie Brenneman, TJ Wahlberger, and most recently Fitch. Hendricks' stand-up has improved significantly. He incorporates a lot of movement into his attack, utilizes a jab, he will work his leg kicks, and can effectively attack with knees and short strikes from the clinch. In addition to this, Hendricks has a solid chin and does a nice job of calmly avoiding his opponent's attacks, moving away to limit the damage before resetting. The wrestling should be nullified in this fight, which is a concern for Koscheck, as he likes to use his takedowns to finalize a close round. If the fight stays standing, Koscheck has a significant wind-up with his right hand, which allows his opponent to see it coming, especially if he doesn't set it up. Conversely, Hendricks does a really nice job of varying his attack and then sneaking his left hand in. As he illustrated against Fitch, Johny can generate a lot of power without much delivery, making it hard for his opponent to detect when the left is coming. Koss had trouble dealing with Mike Pierce in close, especially when Pierce was landing quick combinations and attacking from the clinch. Techniques that Hendricks does well. Mentally, I don't believe Koss has fully recovered from the facial injury suffered against GSP, making him vulnerable if his opponent starts to land with consistency. Josh already has 1 knockout on his resume against Paulo Thiago, and Hendricks is a far more dangerous striker, so my prediction is Johny Hendricks to defeat Josh Koscheck by knockout. My final prediction of the episode is my Adrenaline Training Center Certified Overdrive Fight of the Night. In the main event of the evening, Jim Miller, 21-3-0, will battle 15-7-0 Nate Diaz in a matchup that could determine the next title challenger. Miller's coming off a submission victory over Melvin Guillard, while Nate has won back-to-back fights since returning to the lightweight division. Now, both Miller and Diaz are BJJ black belts and have won the majority of their fights by submission, Miller with 12 and Diaz 10. Now, the submission edge is difficult to determine, although Jim does average more submission attempts per fight at 3.14 compared to only 1.71 for Nate. Miller will aggressively pursue a hold even to his own detriment, as was the case in the Ben Henderson fight, while Diaz is less likely to force an opportunity, waiting for an opening to present itself. If there is any edge on the mat, Miller is a former NCAA wrestling champion, and considering Diaz's past difficulties with wrestling-based fighters, this could be a big issue in this fight. On the feet, Nate has really come into his own in recent fights, with no showing more impressive than his win over Donald Cerrone, where he landed a career-high 260 strikes. The Diaz brothers are well documented as talented strikers, using their patented Stockton slap, successfully battering their opponents without expending a great amount of energy. Nate throws punches in bunches, leading with a right jab, and effectively extending to exploit his reach advantage even further. He snaps his combinations and changes levels, blasting his adversary's midsection with a bombardment of strikes. Diaz is most effective when he's pushing the action and forcing his opponent to move backwards. Against Cerrone, he continually forced Cowboy to backpedal and reset, which severely limited his offensive output. Now, Miller doesn't have the reach that Diaz does, and although he only has 3 wins by knockout, he has decent power, and he dropped talented Muay Thai striker Dwayne Ludwig with a combination prior to submitting him. Like Diaz, Miller is an aggressive striker who effectively uses his speed well and constantly attacks his opponents. Miller had some trouble with Melvin Guillard's speed during the striking exchanges, but Jim should have the edge in this area against Diaz. Now, Nate is known for his conditioning, but I don't anticipate Miller having issues fighting the full 5 rounds either, which takes away one of Nate's greatest assets. Additionally, Jim has an excellent chin and an impressive durability, which is a must when dealing with Nate's death by accumulation style. Now, Diaz has looked fantastic in his last 2 fights, but consideration should be given to the fact that both his opponents were willing to fight a style that benefited Nate. In reality, this will be the first time in over 2 years that Diaz will face a wrestling-based opponent at lightweight, and Miller also has the BJJ skills to match Nate. Conversely, Miller's only 2 losses in his last 5 years have come against Ben Henderson and Gray Maynard, who used their wrestling skills and overall physical strength to neutralize Miller. Not really a style that Nate is known to emulate. If Diaz can defend the takedown attempts and use his reach to keep Jim on the outside, he can turn this into his style of fight. But I foresee Miller using his speed to get inside and movement to avoid the straightforward attacks, aggressively attack Diaz, not allow Diaz to set the pace, and eventually shoot for takedowns when the opportunity shows up. This is going to be an incredibly close fight, but my prediction is Jim Miller to defeat Nate Diaz by decision. Welcome back to Kamikaze Countdown. I want to touch upon the UFC's newest signing, as the UFC has signed former Bellator, I guess still current Bellator middleweight champion Hector Lombard. Now, Lombard comes into the UFC with an impressive winning streak, and he's fought some talented guys in that time span. But the question is, when you're not in the UFC, are you padding that record with some lesser competition? Well, we're about to find out as he comes to the biggest organization in the world. And it's no surprise, the first thing Lombard does is he calls out UFC middleweight kingpin Anderson the Spider Silva. Unfortunately for him, Silva's preoccupied with Las Vegas and his current opponent, Chael Sonnen, who will give him all he can handle there. Now, as far as Hector Lombard is concerned, I think he needs a warm-up fight in the UFC. I think Brian Stann has a perfect opportunity. Stann has proven to be a dangerous middleweight against anyone that's not a super talented wrestler. I think, and Stan, of course, didn't take a lot of damage in his last fight, so I think Lombard versus Stan in the near future would be a fantastic first matchup for Lombard. If he wins that fight, I would not mind seeing him challenge for the title against whether it be Sonnen or Silva, especially if it is Silva. I'm not interested in seeing Vitor Belfort back in the cage just yet with Anderson Silva, so a little bit of fresh blood and Lombard in there if he gets through Stan. If Stan wins that fight, he climbs up the ladder and Lombard's back down through the middleweight ranks and trying to rebuild his position to challenge for a title. Either way, Hector Lombard, exciting new addition to the UFC's middleweight division. I look forward to seeing him compete. I wish him the best of luck, and it should be very interesting to see where we go from here. Kamikaze Countdown, thank you for watching. So those are my predictions for the upcoming UFC on Fox event. 3 on the episode, the rest available over at kamikazeoverdrive.net. Please check them out. Also available on the site is my UFC on Fox bet pack, only $5. I give the parlays, I give a fight-by-fight betting breakdown, and I explain to you the values in each fight. And I'll talk about, yes, I predicted fighter A, but based on the betting odds, fighter B has a ton of value, so please, consider putting a bet down on him. I give my confidence list of the predictions I make, pointing in the direction of who I think is the best chance of winning, and I give some props. So $5, check that out. It's a fantastic little bet pack and a ton of information available, and you won't be disappointed if you do invest. And heck, it's only $5. Also on the website, my latest interview in the one-on-one with series, Johny Hendricks, co-main event. I wish him the best of luck, and he was a great interview, sitting down and answering all of my questions. I appreciate that greatly, so please check that out as well, and best of luck to Johny Hendricks going forward. Thank you very much to all of my sponsors. The list of the sponsors and their links available on the website. And my next show, I will see you back here. It's a double show with 2 events, a Strikeforce and UFC in a very close period of time, so I'll look at 2 different events. I'll probably break down 4 fights on the main card. And that's enough for me. Thank you very much for watching Kamikaze Overdrive MMA predictions, and I'll see you back here in a very short period of time.